Chapter 1, The Arrest. The night Marissa Cole disappeared wasn't supposed to be remarkable. It wasn't stormy. It wasn't a holiday. It was just an ordinary, humid summer evening in Hawthorne County, until she drove into the intersection that changed her life forever. And here's where the story takes its first chilling turn. Marissa didn't vanish in the woods. She didn't vanish while walking home. She vanished after being taken into police custody, the one place she should have been safest. That detail alone sent shockwaves through a small southern town. Because if a missing person case could begin inside the county jail, then the system itself wasn't broken, it was weaponized. The last drive home. At 9:47 p.m., Marissa's blue Honda Civic rolled down Highway 14. She had just finished her late shift at Barker's Diner, where she worked tables 6 nights a week. Co-workers said she was exhausted, but in good spirits. She had plans for the weekend, and she texted her younger brother just minutes before pulling onto the road. Finally heading home. Lock the door. I'll be there soon. It was a text he would never get to answer. Sheriff's deputies claim they pulled her over for a broken taillight. But when her family inspected the car later, both taillights worked perfectly. What's worse, the dashcam footage from the patrol car that stopped her was never logged, and the officers on duty refused to confirm who initiated the stop. Within 20 minutes of that flashing blue light filling her rearview mirror, Marissa was in handcuffs. The arrest report stated that she was combative, disorderly, and possibly under the influence. But here's the problem. Friends and family insist she didn't drink, didn't use drugs, and had no history of violence. Witnesses driving by the traffic stop reported something entirely different. A calm young woman asking why she was being arrested, surrounded by 2 deputies who seemed nervous, not forceful. Something about that stop felt wrong from the very beginning. A name everyone knew. In Hawthorne County, you couldn't separate crime from politics, and you couldn't separate politics from Sheriff Ray Dalton. He'd been in office for over 20 years, re-elected 6 times, always unopposed. His word carried more weight than a judge's ruling. And when Dalton's deputies made an arrest, the town rarely questioned it. But this arrest? This was different. Because Marissa wasn't a stranger or a transient passing through town. She was the daughter of Elaine Cole, a school secretary who had lived in Hawthorne her entire life. Everyone knew Elaine. Everyone knew Marissa, which made her disappearance not just suspicious, but impossible to sweep under the rug. The first 48 hours. The morning after the arrest, Elaine drove to the sheriff's office to check on her daughter. She brought a change of clothes, thinking Marissa would be released on a misdemeanor charge. But when she asked the desk clerk about her daughter's status, the woman frowned, shuffled through some papers, and said quietly, "I don't see her name here." Elaine pushed harder, demanding to see the intake logs. Eventually, a deputy emerged from the back room and confirmed that Marissa had been booked but was no longer in custody. Released. Just like that. No paperwork. No timestamp. No explanation. Elaine's heart sank. Because if her daughter wasn't in jail anymore, then where was she? And this is where the story begins to blur the line between incompetence and intentional cover-up. Because what Elaine didn't know, what no one knew at the time, was that every trace of her daughter's presence inside that jail was about to disappear. Seeds of doubt. By the second day, neighbors were whispering. Some said they saw deputies escorting Marissa into the jailhouse. Others swore she was never brought inside at all. But here's the truth. Both could be correct. Because when reporters later demanded the surveillance footage from the jail's entrance, they were told the cameras malfunctioned that night. That malfunction lasted exactly 2 hours, beginning 10 minutes before Marissa's alleged arrival and ending 10 minutes after deputies said she was released. 2 hours. Just enough time for a person to vanish from the system. The questions nobody could answer. By the end of that week, the story spread beyond Hawthorne County. Local radio stations carried the headline, "Young woman missing after jail release." But every time journalists asked the sheriff's office for details, they got the same 3 words. No comment available. Who arrested her? No comment. Who signed her release? No comment. Where's the paperwork? No comment. Where's Marissa Cole? No one could answer. The hook for what comes next. That's when a devastating realization sank in for Lane. Her daughter hadn't been lost. She had been erased. And if the only people with the power to find her were the same people who erased her, how could the truth ever come out? What Elaine didn't know was that her fight was just beginning. And soon, the sheriff himself, the man who had sworn to uphold justice, would be the one to stop the investigation cold. Chapter 2, Inside the Jail. If the traffic stop was where Marissa's story began, the jail was where it ended, at least officially. According to the Hawthorne County Sheriff's Office, Marissa was processed at 10:32 p.m. and released less than 12 hours later. That should have been the end of the story. A simple arrest, a routine release. But when her family demanded proof of that release, everything began to unravel, because inside the walls of the Hawthorne County Jail, nothing added up. The paperwork, that didn't exist. Every person booked into the jail goes through the same process: fingerprinting, mugshot, and an entry into the electronic jail management system. It's automatic, and it leaves a digital trail that can't be erased without someone higher up authorizing it. Yet when Marissa's mother requested her daughter's booking sheet, the clerk shrugged and said, "It must have been misplaced." Misplaced? Booking sheets don't get misplaced. They're backed up on multiple servers, logged by multiple employees. But somehow, every trace of Marissa's paperwork was gone. A local lawyer later described it bluntly. For her records to vanish like that, somebody didn't make a mistake. Somebody hit delete. And that somebody had the power to override the system. Deputies who saw too much. Behind closed doors, deputies whispered to each other. One later admitted, off the record, that Marissa never should have been arrested. Another claimed she overheard Ray's voices the night Marissa was booked. "I heard her asking why she was there," the deputy confided. "She sounded scared, not violent." But when pressed on why none of this was in a report, the deputy clammed up. It was as if an invisible wall of silence had been built inside that jail. No one wanted to go on record. No one wanted to risk crossing Sheriff Dalton. Because in Hawthorne County, disloyal deputies didn't last long. The cameras that went dark. In cases like this, surveillance footage can make or break the investigation. Every hallway in the jail was equipped with cameras. Cheap, grainy ones, but cameras nonetheless. They should have shown Marissa being let in, processed, and eventually released. Except on the night of her arrest, the cameras malfunctioned. According to a technician's log, the system rebooted itself at 10:24 p.m. and didn't come back online until 12:31 a.m. That meant the footage covering Marissa's entire booking. Her arrival, her cell assignment, and her alleged release was blank. Blank. 2 hours erased from existence. And if you're wondering whether that was a coincidence, you're not alone. Reporters asked the sheriff's office why only that specific time frame went missing. The sheriff's spokesperson said, "Technical errors happen. It's unfortunate timing." But in a small-town jail with a history of convenient malfunctions, few believe it was an accident. The deputies who disappeared. Within 2 weeks of Marissa's arrest, 2 deputies abruptly resigned. They didn't file complaints. They didn't hold press conferences. They just packed up and left town. One sold his house. Another quietly moved 2 counties over. When Angela Price, the reporter who would later become obsessed with the case, tracked them down, both refused to comment. One slammed the door in her face. The other muttered just 3 words. "Talk to Dalton." That was it. 2 grown men, both sworn officers of the law. Too afraid to say anything more. The sheriff's first statement. At first, Sheriff Ray Dalton presented himself as a man determined to find the truth. Standing behind a podium, his broad frame looming over the microphones, he declared, "We will investigate this disappearance with the full force of this office. No stone will be left unturned. We owe it to the Cole family, and we owe it to this community." His words sounded confident, reassuring. Even, for a moment, Hawthorne believed him. But even then, people noticed what Dalton didn't say. He never acknowledged that Marissa had last been seen in his jail. He never admitted she had been in his department's custody at all. To hear him tell it, Marissa had simply gone missing somewhere between her car and her home. He was rewriting the narrative before it had even been written. Elaine's visit to the jail. determined to get answers. Elaine Cole marched into the jail lobby just 3 days after her daughter's disappearance. She demanded to see her daughter's cell. The deputies refused. She demanded to speak with whoever had processed her. They claimed no one was available. So Elaine sat down in the lobby and refused to leave. For 8 hours, she sat there, clutching her daughter's photo, staring at the deputies behind the glass. Finally, one deputy came out and whispered to her, "You need to stop asking questions. It's not safe." Elaine later described that moment as the day she realized her fight wasn't just against the sheriff's office. It was against a machine built to protect itself. Whispers of a pattern. Around this time, Angela Price began digging through old case files. What she found was disturbing. Over the past decade, at least 3 other individuals had gone missing within 48 hours of being arrested in neighboring counties. Their names never made headlines. Their families were poor, often people of color, often without lawyers to fight for them. Their cases were filed away as unsolved. Angela began to wonder, was Marissa part of a larger pattern? A pattern of people silenced in custody? The town's uneasy silence. Hawthorne wasn't a big city. Rumors traveled faster than truth, and soon the town was split in 2. Some believed the sheriff had nothing to do with Marissa's disappearance, that she had run away, or worse, that she had been killed by someone outside the jail. Others whispered that Dalton was covering up something inside his own department. But here's the chilling part. The louder those whispers grew, the quieter the sheriff's office became. By the end of the second week, Dalton had pulled his investigators off the case. No press briefings, no updates, no searches, just silence. And in that silence, a truth began to take root. If the sheriff wasn't going to find Marissa, then maybe he already knew exactly where she was. The hook for what's next. Marissa Cole walked into the Hawthorne County Jail on a summer night in 2023. According to the sheriff's office, she walked out the next morning, but no camera recorded it. No deputy signed her release. No one ever saw her again. And within weeks, the sheriff who swore to solve her case would do the unthinkable. He would stop the investigation himself. Chapter 3, The Sheriff Who Stopped Investigating. In the beginning, Sheriff Ray Dalton looked like the man who would save the day. He stood tall, broad-shouldered in his crisp uniform, the kind of figure that small-town citizens trusted without question. For 2 decades, Dalton had built his image as a guardian of Hawthorne County, a sheriff who solved every burglary, every shooting, every high-profile case. But the case of Marissa Cole would become his undoing, because instead of finding answers, Dalton did something no one expected. He stopped looking, and that silence spoke louder than any evidence ever could. A career built on control. To understand Dalton's choices, you need to understand the man himself. Ray Dalton wasn't just a sheriff. He was a sheriff. In Hawthorne County, elections came and went without real competition. His name was always on a ballot, unopposed, as if no one dared to run against him. He had deep ties with judges, prosecutors, and the county commissioners. Dalton had built an empire, not just a department. And in Hawthorne, that empire ran on loyalty. If you crossed him, you lost your job. If you questioned him, you lost your case in court. If you investigated him, you risked losing everything. And in the case of Marissa Cole, Dalton's empire was about to be tested in a way it never had before. The first signs of retreat. At first, Dalton appeared eager to show the town that he was in control. Press conferences were scheduled daily. Deputies were seen canvassing neighborhoods. A tip line was set up, but behind the scenes, cracks began to show. Witnesses who called the tip line were told their information wasn't relevant. Deputies who asked too many questions were reassigned to traffic duty. And when Angela Price, the reporter, requested official records, her calls were ignored. By week 2, the sheriff's all-hands investigation was suddenly scaled back. Deputies no longer knocked on doors. The press conferences grew shorter, then stopped entirely. And then the final blow, Dalton officially declared that there was no evidence of foul play. A woman goes missing from inside his jail, and the sheriff's conclusion was simple. Case closed. The family pushes back. Elaine Cole, Marissa's mother, refused to accept that. She showed up at county meetings, holding her daughter's photo, demanding answers. Each time, Dalton promised he'd get back to her, but the answers never came. In one meeting, Elaine confronted him directly. "Elaine, my daughter was in your jail, Sheriff. How do you explain her disappearance?" "Dalton, Mrs. Cole, with all due respect, we don't know where your daughter went after her release. People leave this town all the time." That single comment enraged the community, because Marissa wasn't just people. She was a lifelong resident, a young woman with a job, a family, and no history of running away. The sheriff's dismissal felt less like incompetence and more like intentional indifference. Theories began to spread, with Dalton refusing to investigate. The town filled the silence with speculation. The innocent theory. Some believed Dalton truly thought Marissa left voluntarily. Maybe she was hiding. Maybe she was abducted elsewhere. The incompetence theory. Others thought Dalton simply didn't know how to handle a case that implicated his own department. The cover-up theory. And then some whispered that Dalton wasn't failing. He was protecting someone. That third theory grew stronger when a leaked memo revealed Dalton had ordered all deputies to stop speaking to the press and to redirect inquiries to his office. He wasn't just stepping back. He was actively silencing others. Angela's investigations heat up. Angela Price, the reporter, refused to let the case die. She published article after article, highlighting the inconsistencies, missing paperwork, camera malfunctions, deputies resigning. Her stories painted Dalton not as a sheriff searching for justice, but as a man orchestrating silence. That didn't sit well with Dalton. Soon, Angela noticed unmarked cars parked near her house. Sources inside the department stopped talking to her, claiming they were threatened with termination. One deputy texted her a single line before deleting his account. "You don't understand. He's protecting someone bigger than us." Dalton's grip on the town. In public, Dalton remained untouchable. Town officials rallied around him, calling him a man of integrity. Churches prayed for his strength. The county commissioners publicly dismissed rumors of corruption, but privately, cracks were forming. A city council member admitted anonymously that Dalton had called in favors to prevent outside investigators from stepping in. State authorities were strangely reluctant to touch the case. And when Elaine requested the FBI's involvement, Dalton himself wrote a letter insisting it wasn't necessary. Why would a sheriff fight against more help in finding a missing young woman, unless that help threatened to expose the truth? The turning point. By the 3-month mark, Dalton had done something no sheriff should ever do in an open missing person investigation. He ordered his office to cease all further active inquiries. Marissa's case was moved to inactive. The search was over. No suspects, no evidence, no answers, just silence. And for the Cole family, that silence was betrayal. The mother who wouldn't quit. Elaine refused to stop. She organized candlelight vigils outside the jail. She spoke to every local news outlet that would listen. She even stood outside Dalton's own church one Sunday, handing out flyers to the congregation. Her persistence only deepened the sheriff's silence. Deputies began avoiding her. Some townspeople told her quietly to be careful. Elaine later told Angela, "They want me to stop, but I won't, because if they can make my daughter disappear, they can do it to anyone." Her words cut to the heart of the case. This wasn't just about one missing person. It was about the power of a system that could erase people without consequence. The hook for what's next. Sheriff Dalton had spent 20 years building his reputation as a man who solved every case. But when it came to Marissa Cole, the sheriff who once prided himself on answers gave the town nothing but silence. As Elaine's fight grew louder, Angela's investigation grew riskier. Because the deeper she dug into Dalton's world, the more she realized Marissa's disappearance wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was a symptom of something far more dangerous hiding in Hawthorne County. Chapter 4. The Family's Search for Truth. For most mothers, grief arrives like a tidal wave after the funeral. But for Elaine Cole, there was no funeral. There was no body. There was no closure. There was only silence. A silence guarded by the sheriff's office that should have been protecting her daughter. And Elaine was determined to break it. The first vigil. 2 weeks after Marissa's disappearance, Elaine organized a candlelight vigil in the courthouse square. At first, just family and neighbors showed up, people who remember Marissa as the smiling waitress who knew everyone's coffee order by heart. But soon, cars lined the streets. College students, church groups, even strangers from the next county came, holding candles and posters that read, "Where's Marissa? Justice for the Cole family. Silence in custody." Elaine stood on the courthouse steps, her voice trembling as she held up her daughter's photo. "My daughter walked into that jail alive, and no one can tell me where she went. I will not stop asking until someone gives me the truth." The crowd erupted in applause, but inside the sheriff's office, Dalton was furious. Deputies reported that he stormed through the halls, demanding to know who let this circus happen. For Elaine, that fury was proof she was hitting the right nerve. The lawsuit. By month 3, Elaine had found an attorney willing to take the case, a civil rights lawyer named Thomas Redfield. He filed a lawsuit against the sheriff's office, accusing them of negligence, obstruction, and violation of Marissa's civil rights. The suit demanded release of all jail surveillance footage, full disclosure of booking records, testimony from every deputy on duty that night. But almost immediately, roadblocks appeared. The county clerk claimed records had been lost in a flood. Deputies invoked union protections and refused to testify. A judge with close ties to Dalton dismissed key portions of the case. Redfield called it a legal brick wall. "It's not just incompetence," he told reporters. "It's an active attempt to bury this case." Elaine wasn't shocked. She had expected resistance. But the speed and force of the dismissal left her shaken. Civil rights groups step in. The story began drawing attention beyond Hawthorne. Organizations like the Southern Justice Initiative and Families Against Custody Deaths began sending representatives to the vigils. They issued press releases calling Marissa's disappearance a clear case of police injustice. For the first time, the pressure on Dalton wasn't just local, it was national. But with that spotlight came danger. Elaine began receiving anonymous phone calls late at night. Sometimes the line was silent. Other times, a man's voice whispered, "Drop it." Elaine reported the calls to the sheriff's office. Their response? "We'll look into it." No investigation followed. The growing divide in town. Hawthorne County was splitting in two. On one side were those who stood with Elaine, demanding answers. On the other hand were Dalton loyalists, people who believed the sheriff could do no wrong. Some residents began accusing Elaine of exploiting her daughter's disappearance for attention. Others suggested Marissa had run away voluntarily. The ugliest rumors came from anonymous social media posts that painted Marissa as a drug user, a criminal, even a prostitute. None of it was true, but the damage was done. Elaine recognized the tactic. "They're trying to smear her name so people stop caring," she said. "But I know my daughter, and I won't let them erase her with lies." Angela and Elaine joined forces. Angela Price, the reporter, grew closer to the family. She attended vigils, interviewed Elaine repeatedly, and began publishing exposés that tied Dalton's silence to systemic issues in other counties. One article went viral under the headline, "How many must vanish in custody before someone listens?" Angela's reporting struck a nerve, but also painted a target on her back. Elaine worried for her safety, but Angela insisted, "If I don't tell this story, who will?" Together, the grieving mother and the relentless reporter became the two most dangerous people in Dalton's world. The FBI petition. By month 6, Elaine gathered thousands of signatures on a petition demanding that the FBI take over the case. She hand-delivered it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. For weeks, nothing happened. Then, quietly, federal agents began making phone calls in town. They interviewed Elaine, Angela, and even a few deputies willing to talk off the record. Hope surged. Maybe, finally, someone bigger than Dalton would step in. But just as quickly, the hope was crushed. The FBI issued a public statement. "At this time, we see no federal jurisdiction in this matter." Behind the scenes, Angela's sources told her Dalton had used his political connections to keep the feds out. Elaine wept when she heard the news. "If they won't help me, then who will?" The relentless mother. Despite every setback, Elaine refused to stop. She plastered Marissa's face on billboards. She spoke at colleges and churches. She appeared on podcasts and regional news stations. Her voice cracked from overuse. Her savings dwindled from legal fees. But her fire never dimmed. Each time she stood in front of a camera, she said the same words. My daughter did not vanish. She was silenced in custody. And I will not stop until I bring her home. Those words burned into the conscience of everyone who heard them. And in Hawthorne County, people began asking themselves a terrifying question. If Elaine was right, then how many others have been silenced before her daughter? The hook for what's next. Elaine Cole's relentless fight turned a local tragedy into a national cry for justice. But every step forward seemed to be met with new resistance. Smears, threats, and walls of silence built by those sworn to protect. And just when it seemed she had run out of allies, fate introduced her to someone equally determined to expose the truth. A young reporter who had uncovered patterns too dangerous to ignore. Together, they would push closer to answers. But in Hawthorne County, the closer you got to the truth, the more likely you were to vanish. Chapter 5. The Reporter Who Wouldn't Let Go. Angela Price wasn't supposed to stay in Hawthorne. She was a freelance journalist, chasing human interest stories across the Midwest, filing copy to regional papers and small digital outlets. Marissa's case was meant to be a 2-day stop, an article about a missing woman. Another headline lost in the noise. But the silence surrounding the sheriff's office dug into Angela's instincts. Reporters know when something doesn't add up. And in Hawthorne, nothing added up. The night Angela made her decision. It was 2 a.m. in her motel room when Angela reread her notes. She had transcript of Elaine's interviews, copies of the sheriff's vague press statements, and a growing pile of unanswered questions. Where was the booking photo? Why had jail logs gone missing? Why was every deputy reciting the same rehearsed phrases? Angela circled one phrase Sheriff Dalton kept repeating. There's no evidence Miss Cole was ever formally in custody. But if that was true, then why had multiple witnesses seen Marissa being led into the station? Angela pushed her chair back, heart pounding. She knew in that moment this wasn't just a story. It was a cover-up. And she wasn't leaving Hawthorne until she exposed it. Patterns in the shadows. Angela began combing through county records, not just for Marissa, but for other inmates. The more she looked, the stranger became. Over the past 8 years, at least 4 other people had gone missing after an arrest in Hawthorne County. Their cases never made news, just quiet dismissals, vague reports, or families too poor or too scared to fight. The pattern was chilling. Minor arrests, no release paperwork, disappeared within 48 hours. Angela pieced the cases together in a draft article she titled, A County Where People Vanish. It was explosive, but publishing it would mean directly accusing the sheriff's office of systemic abuse. Without airtight proof, she risked being discredited or worse. The deputy who talked. Then came the break. One night, Angela got a message slipped under her motel door. It was a torn page from a legal pad with just 2 words. Meet me. The note included a time and the initials DH. Angela knew the name immediately. Deputy Hank Daniels, a veteran officer with a reputation for being quiet but decent. They met in the back booth of a closed diner at midnight. Daniels looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. He leaned forward, voice trembling. She was here. Marissa Cole was in jail. I saw her. Angela froze. Then what happened? Daniels shook his head violently. I can't say. But listen to me. If you keep pushing this, you need to be careful. People don't just vanish here by accident. Before Angela could press him, Daniels slid out of the booth and disappeared into the night. It wasn't much, but it was the first inside confirmation that Elaine was right. The retaliation begins. Within a week, Angela noticed she was being followed. A black pickup idled across from her motel. Her tires were slashed twice. One night, she returned to find her laptop gone. Nothing else was taken. She reported the theft to the sheriff's office. They took her statement, but the deputy filing the report smirked as he said, Maybe you just misplaced it. Angela knew what it meant. They were watching her. But instead of retreating, she doubled down. The viral article. Angela published her first major piece. Silence in Custody. The Disappearance of Marissa Cole. It went live on a Tuesday morning. By nightfall, it had been shared tens of thousands of times. Regional news outlets picked it up, then national ones. Elaine Cole's face appeared on TV screens across the country. Sheriff Dalton called a press conference, his jaw tight, his words clipped. This so-called reporting is nothing more than sensationalism. We have no evidence of wrongdoing, and we strongly urge the public not to spread misinformation. But Dalton's anger only fueled the fire, because now the world was watching Hawthorne. Elaine and Angela, a reluctant alliance. Elaine had been skeptical of journalists at first. Too many had swooped in, taken her story, and vanished when something better came along. But Angela was different. She stayed. She fought. The two women began working together, Angela chasing leads, Elaine organizing vigils and petitions. Their partnership gave the movement new strength. People started calling them the two voices of Hawthorne, the message that changed everything. Then one night, Angela received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "I know what happened to Marissa." The body of the email was just an address on the edge of town. Angela debated whether to go. It could be a tip or a trap, against her better judgment. She grabbed a recorder, slipped it into her bag, and drove out alone. The address led to an abandoned farmhouse, its windows boarded, its roof sagging. Her headlights cut across the front porch, where a single envelope sat under a rusted lantern. Inside the envelope was a flash drive. No note, no explanation. Angela's hands shook as she pocketed it. She turned back toward her car, only to notice she wasn't alone. Across the field, a figure stood in the dark, watching. The cliffhanger. Angela froze. The figure didn't move. The night was silent, except for the wind rattling the trees. She whispered into her recorder, "This may be my only lead. If something happens to me, someone needs to know I was here." The figure stepped closer. Angela bolted to her car, slammed the door, and sped off down the dirt road, her heart hammering, headlights bouncing over the ruts. When she reached her motel, she locked the door, drew the curtains, and finally opened the flash drive. What she saw on the screen made her gasp, because it was proof, undeniable proof, that Marissa Cole had been alive inside that jail. But what the footage revealed about the final moments was far worse than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 6, The Flash Drive. Angela Price sat cross-legged on the motel bed, laptop balanced on her knees. The flash drive plugged into the side like a live grenade. Her hands trembled as she clicked open the single video file. For a moment, the screen stayed black. Then, grainy security footage filled the screen. It was the Hawthorne County Jail. Angela's breath caught in her throat. Proof of Marissa. The timestamp read 11:42 p.m. The camera angle showed a narrow hallway lined with cell doors. And there, escorted by two deputies, was Marissa Cole. Angela slapped a hand over her mouth. There was no mistaking her. The loose denim jacket, the nervous way she tugged at her hair. It was Marissa, alive, walking under her own power into a cell. This was it. The proof Elaine had begged for. But the footage didn't stop there. The ominous sequence. The next timestamp jumped forward 3 hours. The same hallway appeared, dimmer now. Marissa's cell door opened. 3 figures stepped inside. Not deputies in uniform. These men wore plain clothes, faces obscured by the camera angle. The audio was silent, but the images were enough. One man gestured for Marissa to stand. Another restrained her wrists. The third carried something, a black bag or cloth. Moments later, the group exited the cell, but Marissa wasn't with them. Angela felt bile rise in her throat. The footage cut abruptly to static. Elaine's reaction. Angela rushed to Elaine's house that night, laptop in hand. Elaine watched the video in silence, clutching a tissue so tightly it tore in her hands. When the screen went black, she whispered, "They killed her." Angela shook her head. "We don't know that. But Whatever happened, it's on them. And now we can prove she was in that jail. Elaine's tears turned to fury. Then we take this to the world. The hidden files. Angela wasn't finished with the flash drive. Alongside the video were several corrupted files labeled with initials RD, JH, KM, with some digging. Angela realized the initials matched other missing arrestees she had uncovered in her research. This wasn't just Marissa. This was bigger, much bigger. Whoever left the drive wanted Angela to see that Marissa's case was part of a pattern, a chain of disappearances tied to the Hawthorne County Jail. The press dilemma. Angela now faced the toughest decision of her career. Publishing the footage could blow the case wide open, but it would also make her and Elaine immediate targets. If Dalton had kept a lid on this for years, he wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatened to expose it. Elaine didn't hesitate. Do it. Put it out there. If they silence us, at least the truth won't die with us. Angela nodded, but she felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just reporting anymore. This was war. The backlash begins. The next morning, Angela leaked still frames from the footage to her editor with one line. This is the proof. Within hours, the images were everywhere. Marissa in custody, the cell door, the mysterious men in plain clothes. Cable news panels dissected every frame. Civil rights groups demanded Dalton's resignation. The Department of Justice announced it was reviewing the matter. But Dalton wasn't retreating. At a hastily called press conference, he stood stone-faced before a crowd of reporters. This footage is doctored. It's an attack on our county, our officers, and the good people of Hawthorne. We will be investigating the source of the so-called evidence. When pressed about the men in the video, Dalton refused to answer. Instead, he issued a chilling warning. Spreading lies has consequences. The men in the shadows. That night, Angela noticed the same black pickup truck parked outside Elaine's house. When she stepped outside, confronted, the engine roared to life and sped off into the dark. Elaine grabbed her arm, whispering, "They know we have it." Angela realized then what Daniels, the deputy who warned her, really meant. This wasn't just about Marissa. This was about an operation, something organized and protected from the top down. And now they were marked. The cliffhanger. At 3 a.m., Angela's phone buzzed. Another anonymous message. This time, it wasn't an address. It was a single sentence. You've only seen one piece of the puzzle. Attached was a new file. A video. Angela's heart pounded as she clicked it open. On the screen wasn't Marissa this time. It was someone else. A man in uniform, bound to a chair, begging for his life inside what looked like the same jail. The camera panned to show his badge. Angela froze. It wasn't a stranger. It was Deputy Hank Daniels, the only man inside the sheriff's office who had dared to speak the truth. And the recording ended with a voice off camera, cold and unrecognizable. This is what happens when you talk.